This PromniCast can be found everywhere. Subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and more. Making the Trade is a Stripe marketing digital experience. Leaders in strategy, video production, and content. Visit stripemarketing.com for more. Hello and welcome to Making the Trade. My name is Clint Bowers, strategy consultant at Stripe Marketing, and today with us from Portland, Oregon, we have John Fries, executive director and co-founder of the business accelerator Startups, and founder and CEO of Journey Gym. John, how you doing today?
Good, Clint. Thanks for having me, man.
You got it, John. Okay, number one, when and how did you decide to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I know exactly when it was, Clint. I was doing guerrilla marketing for AT&T back when they had this campaign called Mr. Politeness Man. And I was in LA living in my father-in-law's house with my wife. And one day, one of the guys that was working on this guerrilla marketing campaign with us said, "Hey, let's go get some fish tacos after we're done." I said, "Sure." He goes, "We need to stop by my apartment real quick." We did. And I saw this box in his living room. And inside of it was this kind of unique looking hat visor combo. And I was like, "What is that thing?" He said, "I call it the head wrap." I said, "What is it?" He goes, It's a product I invented. I actually have a patent." And he showed me this framed patent on the wall. Oh my gosh. He goes, "Yeah, it's a hybrid of a hat and a visor. It just never existed. And anyway, I patented it." I'm like, "Have you sold it?" He's like, "Not really, just a couple." I said, "I will right now start this business with you, no question." And I started going out to his house every day. And we started selling that product, and we sold it to Stussy. We sold it to a number of other companies, and that was my first entree into joining a company. I was not a co-founder. He did have an established, corporate entity. He did have a product. He had gone all the way through that process, but for me, that was the moment. After that, I got a job with one of the largest startups or largest funded startups in the .com era called Cosmo.com, doing indirect guerrilla marketing for them, and so I moved on to that, but ultimately that was really the impetus for me. From that moment on, I knew I wanted to do something where we were creating new products or solutions that had never existed before, and that's just been my life for the last 15 years.
Question number two. After constant focus and hard work on startups, when did you realize it was all worth it?
The first time one of our friends' companies, specifically in Starbucks, just because that's where most of our startup founder entrepreneurial friends and colleagues exist, got acquired, and it was a company called Asset Exchange. It was the first exit of the group, really good positive exit, and they came into one of the meetings and said, I sat down at the pool with the CEO of one of the largest competitors in our space, and he said, "We'd like to buy your company." And at that moment, I knew it was not only possible and plausible that my brother and I could sell our first startup, but that all of us could, and that it can be as simple as an interaction at a pool with the CEO of your largest competitor. You know what, at that moment I realized what we're doing here with this organization and what we're doing with peer mentoring for one another is going to change the game. And fast forward another about 6 years, which sounds like a long time, 3 total members of those 7 founding members of the group have exited for quite a large sum of money in total. And the remaining 4 companies that co-founded Starbucks are all still in business. 3 of them are annual multi-million-dollar top-line revenue-generating companies, and one is very successful, but not at that exact same level financially. So all 7 founding companies survived and made it, and that for me was a moment where I just said, "This is worth it. This is going to work. We can do this. We can build these businesses. We can sell them. We can change the world. We can make a return for our investors." And this startup life isn't all sacrifice. There are a couple of moments, usually day one and the last day are the 2 that are the most fun. A lot of heartache in the middle, but it's just one of those moments. It's like seeing someone, I don't know, get on American Idol and make it to the top 12. It's just, you just sort of feel inspired at a level that you probably haven't in a long time, that makes you just keep going.
Question number 3. When were you most tested and challenged while building a company?
I would say thus far, probably the most difficult sort of season that had the sort of most significant positive outcome was when my brother approached me in 2000 and 7 and said, it's time to sell the company. The company was in a relatively good spot. We were growing, we were improving our product suite, and we were starting to become a notable brand in our space, which was the healthcare education space. And he knew I was burnt out at that point. We had butted heads on a lot of different topics, just as co-founders of a business, but he was the CEO and the ultimate decision maker. And I definitely sort of, I remember it was a Starbucks in downtown. I definitely, pushed back, and I was like, well, I guess if that's your call, that's what we're going to do. Fast forward, essentially exactly 6.5 months, we sold the company for a very positive return to the largest provider in our space. It was a hellacious 6 months, a lot of work, crazy hours, as you well know what it's like when you're exiting with a company. And in the end, though, it was the right move at the right time for both of us. But in hindsight, the timing was right. A lot of people would argue that today, if we had held onto the company, it was still going 5.5 years later, we could probably have sold it for 3 or 4 times what we did then. But I honestly don't know if I'd be alive. I mean, it was, as first-time entrepreneurs, we were so enthralled with the notion of giving it our all that it was unsustainable. The hours, the energy, the output. So I think in hindsight, he had a sense, which he often does, that now's the time, it's the right time. And it was. Once we actually went out, hired an investment banker, and started to tap into the market and to call our competitors and partners and say, do you have interest? The company that actually bought us said we had just finished an analysis of 12 companies in this space, and you came out number 1, and we just completed it. In the very first meeting we had with the CEO of this company, he said within 15 minutes, you're here today because I want to buy you. So I don't know, maybe my brother's clairvoyant, but looking back, that was a strong move on his part and the right move for our company.
Question number 4. Looking back at when it all began, what would you tell the 20-year-old you?
First and foremost, I'd probably say, hey, listen, if you're going to do these businesses, get ready for what is beyond what you could ever imagine from a sacrifice perspective. It's really, when you're 20, you've been used to living off of $9,000 to $16,000 a year. You have no problem sleeping on a friend's couch for 2 weeks in a row, and personal hygiene is questionable. I'd say, hey, listen, you really got to understand this is a big thing to bite off. I think it's tough for someone to absorb that at that age, because again, they sort of feel invincible and they feel like it's blue ocean. But I would also say, know that in the long run, it's going to make a humongous difference on your character. It's going to make a huge difference on the friendships that you have, the relationships that you have, how you sort of see life. I don't see life anymore as, sort of the world is your oyster, and you can just go and experience life, and you can sort of do whatever you feel like you were put here to do. I would say that life to me now is definitely more about a very specific set of purposes for each one of us, that if you can tap into what your God-given skills are and go out there and utilize them, the life you were supposed to live will sort of unfold. Not that it's not without a lot of heartache and a lot of difficulties. I think everyone faces that. But I would try and communicate that to the 20-year-old John. The other thing I would say is, try and have a little bit of balance, because I've not been good about work-life balance for a long time. I'm getting better, but that does impact, yourself, your health, your family, your friends, and you do have to enjoy the journey along the way, no pun intended, because it is a long road. I think a lot of people that have corporate jobs, if you will, or are small business owners, tend to have some nights, many weekends, if not many weeks a year off. And when you don't have that for a decade, it definitely sort of changes your DNA, So those are probably the 2 main things I would say. But I would also say, in the end, you got to do this. This is what you were put here to do. It's what your purpose is. And I know that in my heart of hearts. And it's not just because I can't stop doing it. It's because the universe, God, just sort of keeps pulling you in that direction, and you just know it's what you're supposed to be doing.
Question number 5. What is the best advice you've ever received?
I'd probably say some of the best advice I've ever received is just it's very cliche, but it's essentially get to know who you are and what your skills are, and try and leverage those as much as possible. And it's sort of the Stephen Covey, put the big rocks in the jar first, and the smaller pebbles, then the sand, and the water, and just try and do what you're best at, and make that your focal point on a daily basis, because kind of everything else will, eventually fall into place. The other thing is WIN, which my brother told me that acronym a long time ago, which is what's important now. And that notion of, waking up in the morning or the night before you go into work and just writing down what are the 2 or 3 things I must accomplish tomorrow. Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and founders think that a startup is a series of disciplined micro events. The reality is what we keep saying is it's a series of just a few very large inflection points where you make a very significant decision, or a very big opportunity comes along and you execute upon it, and it completely changes the trajectory of your business. Very few businesses say, yeah, I went and then I hit the other store and I pitched them my wares and they purchased it, and I went to the next one and I went to the next one and I went to the next one. You can definitely build a nice small business that way, but you're not going to become a household name or build a brand that changes the world, most likely, in that capacity. There are a series of points in time, just like in your life, where decisions have to be made, risk has to be taken, and all of a sudden it changes the game. And those are the proverbial tipping points that even sometimes they don't feel like it at the moment, but when you look back, you're like, man, there was 5 or 6 definitive moments over the history of that 10-year business that really defined who we were. I mean, in every sense.
Bottom line, John, why is the trade worth it?
It's all about personal purpose. It's, I think looking back, I will of course regret not having experienced more things in regards to work-life balance, but I also believe that we all have to essentially live our personal purpose to, again, sort of have the life that you were supposed to live unfold. And I think it has the greatest impact on the world. I mean, some people are unbelievably talented in particular realms that you and I have either no interest in or have no skills in, and you're pretty mesmerized by what one individual or small group of people can do when they're, again, sort of living their purpose in that area. It's just, it's super powerful. And I think fortunately we're living in a world where you can essentially make a living at doing anything that you're good at. If you're great at it, you can make a phenomenal living. And so that for me is definitely why my trade and what I do matters and is worth doing, even though it's not an absolute blast all the time, but it's exactly what I think everyone is sort of at your core thinking about when it's, your first time at the coast, when you're 20s with some friends around a fire and it's getting late and you're sort of thinking about what am I going to do with my life? And I think it's a thing that you probably think about when you're close to the end of your life. You look back and say, did I use my time wisely and my skills wisely to hopefully positively impact the world? So I think that's the number one thing you got to do.
Finally, John, what is the next adventure you're focused on?
Right now, I'd have to say on the business front, what I'm most excited about is really the expansion of Starvups. The group's been around for almost a decade and a half. We recently opened up our second chapter that's officially a part of the Starvups group in Eugene, Oregon. The original chapter was in Portland, Oregon. And we are continually, Clint, getting tapped by incubators, accelerators, and funds, predominantly west of the Mississippi, but asking us how Starvups has accomplished what it's accomplished with very little dollars, without a fund behind it, and with a model of acceleration that just doesn't exist anywhere else in the country or the world. So that's what I'm most excited about, the inbound demand and request on this particular type of model that Starvups has, which is a proven peer mentoring model for founders, is just getting a lot of notoriety around its efficacy.
Well, that's it for us. I'm Clint Bowers with Stripe Marketing and Making the Trade, and what happens next is up to you. We'll see you next time. For more information on Starvups, be sure to visit www.starvups.com. Making the Trade is a Stripe Marketing digital experience made in collaboration with VOLSTA.com. Subscribe now and visit VOLSTA.com for more amazing stuff.